Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive with Dr. Rebecca Risk. Do you ever feel that even though nothing seems seriously wrong and you pass all the medical tests, that you still feel that your health, pain, and fatigue are completely out of control? It doesn't have to be that way. Listen to the tips and suggestions given on our program today and take back control of your health. Now, here is Dr. Rebecca Risk.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Warren Farrell. Warren is a pioneer in the women's movement as the only man elected 3 times to the board of the National Organization for Women in NYC. He's currently chair of the coalition to create a White House Council on Boys and Men and a pioneer in the men's movement. He is the author of the just published book, The Boy Crisis. So, Warren, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to speaking with you. It sounds like you're making a real contribution to the world.
Well, you know, I do try, and I thought your book was a really good contrast. I did a show on the pressure on girls, and after reading your book, I see that, boys and girls are both under a lot of pressure, but they're under different pressure. And it is important to recognize that because, things have changed, especially with you being involved with the women's movement. You know how they've changed, and, we need to adapt so that, we have healthier children.
We really do. One of the things that I think very few people realize about boys and men is sort of in my role with being on the board of NOW in New York City, I was always very sort of talking a lot about the importance of girls not having high self-esteem and girls being left out of the power structure. And as I came to sort of look more carefully at boys and girls and form hundreds of men's groups and hear where men were talking from their hearts and finally could get in touch with their feelings, I realized that something else huge was going on, and that is that to be a male historically has meant to be trained to be disposable in war, or disposable in the workplace. 93% of deaths, as you probably know, occur in the workplace, and many of them occur what is called remnant deaths. That is, a person is a firefighter and he doesn't directly die at work, but he dies from black lung disease a few years after work or outside of the workplace, and no one can 100% for sure say that the coal miner or firefighter was killed at work, but he was most likely killed through the black lung disease, which was contracted at work. And so, as boys learn to become a man, one of the things is that we learn every generation had its war, and every father and mother, especially fathers, said, the boys saw pictures of their fathers or their grandfathers in a Marine uniform, and learned that they too could be heroes if they would be willing to risk their lives to serve their country, to protect us all, male, female, children from having to speak German under Nazi rule. And so boys have typically been willing to sacrifice their lives in order for what I call the social bribe of being called a hero, or getting the pride of becoming the pride of one's parents, or being the person who is dropped, who is what I call son dropped by the father. So, for example, an example of son dropping would be, a dad and mom go to a football game at Thanksgiving at the local high school, and one of their sons is playing, and another son is not playing, and so the son that's playing finally catches a touchdown pass, and the dad goes, "That's my son! I just caught that pass." And the other son is standing next to dad and has never heard his dad be so excited about having him as a son, and he picks up the message that I have not been willing to risk my disposability, to risk a spinal cord injury or a concussion playing football, and which is basically preparation to be disposable and preparation to associate yourself as a hero and respected and being proud of by being disposable. And so what boys have learned historically is what I call heroic intelligence, and heroic intelligence is preparation for a short life versus health intelligence, which is preparation for a long life, a healthy life, a happy life. And so those are So the transition that we need to make from the way our children were raised, what we call successfully in the old days, which was heroic intelligence, we are now beginning to be able to make a transition to raising our sons with health intelligence. But that means almost everything we did to train our sons to be successful in the past must be questioned for them to create emotional intelligence and health and wellness that you talk about in your program for the future.
Well, I had actually never thought of it this way until I read your book, that boys are brought up to be disposable, and it does make sense, as you said, sending them off to war. And there's a stat in your book where you talk about who's likely to be laid off as well, and I think men were higher in that, and I think how they feel about it is also a little different.
Yes, we saw this especially during the what came to be called the man session in 2008, where men were in manufacturing jobs and construction jobs are very vulnerable to a recession. When there is a recession, many people suffer health-wise, and the health industry during a recession goes up in demand. And as we know, women are far more likely to be in the health professions, and so they're more likely to be able to have a job during recessions, whereas men are more likely to lose their job during recessions. And losing a job for a woman and a man are very, very different phenomenon. Losing a job is to a man like being in a severe car accident and a woman who has been trained during her life to be valued as being beautiful loses her beauty in a car accident, and a man may lose his attractiveness in a car accident too, but it doesn't. The value we place on a man's physical look, except for height, the value we place on his physical look aside from height is not as great as it is for women, whereas conversely, if a man, very few women want to marry men in the unemployment line. A man who, even if he's reading The Boy Crisis in the unemployment line, or something like, I'm okay, you're okay, or some other self-improvement book in the unemployment line, a woman, particularly a woman who wants to have children, she is very hesitant to marry a man when she wants to have children. If that man doesn't have a job, unless he has unless he's doing something like going to be a medical doctor or an attorney, and he's just about ready to get there.
Which shows, especially if this is still going on, that although there's this shift in women going to work, we're still putting that pressure on our boys that was there for a long time, except the dynamic has changed a lot.
Yes, there is a lot of opportunity that happens within this pressure, though. And so what I'm encouraging in the Boy Crisis, first of all, what I found in the Boy Crisis is that, if we really want to look at health and wellness, the Boy Crisis is about a lack of health and wellness and education and mental health. The suicide levels, the depression rates among boys are extraordinary. So, for example, when boys and girls are 9 years of age, both boys and girls are very unlikely to commit suicide. But they're equal in numbers of suicides that are committed by both boys and girls. Between the ages of 10 and 14, boys are twice as likely to commit suicide. Between the ages of 15 and 19, boys are 4 times as likely to commit suicide. Between the ages of 20 and 25, boys are 5.5 times as likely, almost 6 times as likely to commit suicide. And so there's 2 important things about this. One is we see how both testosterone and the pressure to prove yourself as a man, combined with the minimal amount of social and emotional intelligence we help men achieve, makes it very difficult for boys who are feeling isolated or lonely to be encouraged to speak up and say what they're feeling. So in college, for example, 75% of the people who visit college counselors and talk with college counselors about suicide are women, but 75% of the people who commit suicide on college campuses are men. And so, and males, and this is among the more educated group, and usually the more emotionally intelligent group of males outside of college, where you have males who are often less in touch with their feelings, the suicide rate is higher during those years.
Well, that's pretty significant that boys are being affected in that way. It's showing that there's something that's making, our children depressed, but our boys are affected in a certain way differently than the girls. Because even if the girls are talking about it, the boys are more likely to commit suicide. And so it must show a desperation on their part, or that they feel like there's no way out past what they're experiencing.
Yes, exactly. When this was such a big issue that I ended up developing a whole inventory of what are red flags of suicide and depression that I included in the Boy Crisis book, and it's really some of those, for example, just four out of those 63 red flags is boys are far more likely to commit suicide when they feel that no one loves them, no one needs them. There's no hope of that changing, and anyone that they might speak with about that would mostly lose respect for them. Whereas girls, when they are feeling suicidal in feelings, they feel that and they let's say attempt suicide, which girls do more frequently than boys. The attempting of suicide is part of the solution. It's the girl saying, I am not committing suicide, but I could be on the verge of doing so. I do believe that in my life there are people who, if I reach out for help in this way, will be willing to help me. Will put their priorities on the back burner and put me for a while on the front burner. And so the attempted suicide, the going to the counselor in college, those are part of saying I'm in trouble, I'm shouting. That's part of the solution. Certainly attempting suicide is a dangerous part of the solution, but it's part of girls knowing how to ask for help. Especially the healthier way, obviously, is going to the counselor, and the much more dangerous way is the slight overdose or cutting or things along those lines. But we basically have to work from square one with boys, because we have two major problems going on with boys that are different from the problems going on with girls. One is the one that I've explained before about heroic intelligence versus health intelligence. Actually three problems. The second is what I call a purpose void, and the third is a dad void. And the three of these together are really leading to boys doing so much worse than girls. So the purpose void is, in the old days, the purpose for boys was to either become that warrior or become a sole breadwinner. And today, fortunately, we need fewer boys to die and more, and we have the sole breadwinning is no longer a characteristic of being male automatically, because so many women are also sharing that burden. And so with women's help, so that's the good news is that fewer boys have the pressure on them to have to earn all the money for the family, and there are smaller families. And so that combination reduces the pressure on boys to be the sole breadwinner, but it also wipes out what boys knew was their sense of purpose in the old days. And so there is what I call a purpose void that has developed among boys more recently. So when you add the purpose void to the dad void, that's when you get into the huge problem. So I found that the boy crisis basically, the boy crisis resides where fathers do not reside, not only in the United States, but all around the developed countries of the world. So in the 63 largest developed nations, boys are falling behind girls in every single academic subject, and especially in reading and writing, which are the two biggest predictors of success and health and wellness. And so so boys are falling behind in these areas, but as I looked more closely, I saw that the reason that in developed countries, two things were happening. One was that there was more permission for divorce, and among the boys who were without fathers after divorce, those were the ones that were part of the boy crisis. And then secondly, there was more permission in developed nations for mothers to have children without being married. Now, in the United States, 53% of all women under 30 who have children, 53% have children without being married. Now, one might say, like I might, gee, what's the big thing about not being married? Well, morally speaking, you can argue it in a number of ways, but in terms of the child's contact with the father, very few fathers are involved with their children more than 3.5 years after the child is born, if they're not in a married situation. So in this large group of women that are having children without being married, many of the children don't even know their dads. Some know their dads, but it's at a very big distance. And the ones even that are living with their dads when they are born, the chances are very good that after 3.5 years, they will not be they'll have what I call dad deprivation. And it's among those boys with dad deprivation that there is an enormous failure to launch. There is dads provide. I ended up outlining when I did the research for the boy crisis. I found 9 to 10 different, very significant differences in the way that moms parent and the way that dads parent. The children that do the best have what I call checks and balance parenting. They have parents that are about equally powerful in their parenting styles, and they constantly communicate with each other about what's best for the child in any given circumstance. So, for example, a mother and father will both, be approached by the child, and a boy in particular might say, "Oh, Mommy, can I climb the tree?" And then Mom will typically say, "Sweetie, maybe in a few years, but not right now. It's too dangerous for you to climb the tree." And approaching Daddy, the dad will probably say, "Yeah, but be careful there. Just watch out for yourself, Sonny." You could, and so the dad will let him climb the tree. The mom won't. But when mom and dad get into a dialogue about it, a constructive dialogue about it, the chances are fairly good that ultimately the child will end up being able to climb the tree, but only up to a certain point, and and then only if the dad is underneath there to cushion any fall that the child might have. And so and he will not be allowed to have his cell phone out there. And so that type of compromise allows the child to do the climbing of the tree, if you will, which then increases the child's IQ, the synapses, his judgment as to what is safe and what is not safe is constantly being honed by the experience of that. And at the same time, he's not likely to, try to prove himself too much by climbing to the highest, weakest branch and falling out and killing himself. And so,
so Warren, I'm going to interrupt for a second here. We do need to take a quick break. We can continue when we're back. We're talking today with Warren Farrell, and we're discussing his book, The Boy Crisis. We'll be back shortly.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
The largest syndicated alternative health talk program has come to the Voice America Network. The Dr. Bob Martin Show is the program that will answer your health questions and help you to heal your own body of many different ailments. Each week, you'll hear the answers that Dr. Bob gives to his callers that help them to be their own doctor most of the time. We'll also discuss developments on the healthcare front and what you need to do to keep your body in top form. The Dr. Bob Martin Show airs Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.
The Voice America Live Events channel is here now to showcase your corporate, individual, or organization's live event. Visit voiceamerica.com/live events to see all of our past live events and find out more. Whether it's a multi-day conference, special speaker, or single-day event, we've got everything to make your event a success. We can do a few hours or a few days. For more information about taking your event to the next level, call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or email info@voiceamerica.com. Again, that's Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or send us an email to info@voiceamerica.com. Voice America is where you are and where you want to be. Join us around the globe as we broadcast live from some of the most interesting events available. Don't forget to view all our live events, including on-demand access to past events that you may have missed by visiting voiceamerica.com/live events.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Warren Farrell. We're discussing his book, The Boy Crisis. So, Warren, I found it really interesting when I did my show on the girls, what's going on with our young girls. They're feeling a lot of pressure to be overachievers. You know, they're trying to get straight A's, and then they're over-involved in things, and they're doing all of this stuff to try to get into college, almost like, 2 or 3 generations later, we have to prove that we can do what we've fought so hard to do. Whereas the boys, you said, are falling behind in education. And this is an interesting contrast just in a few generations. What is happening to our children?
Yes, the boys who, I think what I was sharing just before break is that when I did the research for the boy crisis, I saw that there were about 9 or 10 causes, and that boys is falling so far behind. But the single biggest cause by a long shot, aside from the purpose void that I mentioned just before break, is the lack of father involvement. And the single biggest thing that contributes, that leads to children with dads doing so much better than children without dads, especially boys with dads doing so much better than boys without dads, is this difference in dad style parenting. So, for example, dads will typically roughhouse with the boys and with their daughters as well. And usually while dad is roughhousing, let's say there's John, Jimmy, and Jane, and dad throws the kids onto the couch, and the game is to pin daddy down in a wrestling match before daddy can pin all 3 daughters down. And so mom sees dad setting this game up and throwing the kids on the couch, and they're just laughing away when they're being thrown onto the couch. And mom is going, "Oh my God, I feel like I have one more child to monitor here." And so the mother is, and the mother's thinking to herself, I can see where this is going. Sooner or later, somebody's going to end up crying or hitting their heads or something like that. And sure enough, with about 100% certainty, the mom's right, and the children do end up crying or hitting their heads. And then dad goes, all right, here's what you should do differently. If you hit your head again, or Jimmy, if you push your younger sister out of the way with your elbow, that's not fair. You have to do it this way. You can fake her out. You can do this and do that, but you can't, push her out with your elbow. You can't use your whole body to hurt her or whatever. And so Jimmy and John and Jane all agree that they'll behave better. And so then the dad returns to the roughhousing, and the mom is looking at the situation and going, "You must be crazy. My feeling, my hint to you that the kids could hurt themselves has come true, and now you are going back and roughhousing more after you saw that this was not dangerous and not good." And dad never explains that when he's roughhousing, the first thing that happens is that he is establishing a bond, a very deep bond with the child, where the children want to be able to please him and do what he wants because they want that excitement, that roughhousing, that risk-taking again. And so Dad will tend to say, when Dad says, you can't push your sister aside like that, the kids all agree to it, but unless they go back and try it out again, to see if when they're in the middle of excitement, what psychologists call they're experiencing emotional intelligence under fire, then the children don't, unless they try it again, go back to the roughhousing, the children can't practice knowing the difference between assertiveness versus aggressiveness, when I can assert myself and how I can assert myself versus what is too much assertion that becomes aggressive. They don't learn to think about, they agree to think about their sisters or brothers, younger brothers' feelings, but they really don't end up doing it when they're so focused on winning. They put the winning over the focusing on the feelings, but what Dad is doing by saying there will be no more roughhousing if, when you try this again, you don't consider your sister's feelings even when you're excited. That's when the children learn to have an experience of the distinction between being assertive versus aggressive, and that's when the children really begin to. And so the data shows us that children that are raised by parents that roughhouse, mostly dads that roughhouse, are far more likely to be empathetic. So they're learning, they're being required to think of their sisters and brothers' feelings rather than just think of themselves and focus on their own winning. They're also more likely to be able to distinguish between being assertive and aggressive because it's not just a lecture that is being repeated again and again, like moms will tend to do. They'll say, think of your sisters and brothers' feelings, and the kids will go, yes, 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 and then they'll go back to behaving the old way, and mom will repeat it again. And so mom will often look over and say, it really sort of upsets and a little bit angers me that, Dad can say something once and the kids pay attention to it, whereas I have to repeat and repeat and repeat it, and the kids don't pay attention to it. And the reason for that is because when mom says something, the kids know it's less likely to be enforced, and when they're really excited and want to win and focusing on themselves, the possibility of something just being repeated to them is not enough to make them think of somebody else's feelings or understand that distinction between assertiveness versus aggressiveness. However, this is just a part of what roughhousing alone contributes to children's ability to be empathetic and to make those distinctions and have what is called emotional intelligence under fire. But I have never met a dad, and before I did the research for the boy crisis, I didn't know either that this was the case. And so, moms can't hear what dads don't say, and dads, parenting magazines, even if dads did read them, do not explain these types of things. And so I found it necessary to explain these things in the boy crisis, so with at least the hope that fathers would read what they do that is of benefit to the children, but they do it so instinctively that they just think that they and the kids are having fun without realizing the benefit to that fun.
Well, so, it's good for dads to know that, but at the same time, what do single mothers do if they want to make sure that their boys learn these lessons, and their children, really, because not having a dad affects girls as well? I mean, there's a lot more single parents out there. So how can they bridge that gap?
Yes, really important question. So first is I'm going to give some concrete ways in a minute, but a less concrete way that is absolutely the most important one, most hopeful one, is to understand, for the mom to go through and the boy crisis book and look at the ways that that the things that dads do that are different, that she's skeptical of, like the roughhousing, like boundary enforcement, like when the kids are failing at something, like they fall on a ski slope, why the dad gets the kid up and has the kid go back down and try the ski slope again, why the dad is not as interested in letting the child change teachers if they're doing badly in school. And so these are the types of tensions between moms and dads that very few moms or dads know. Now, the value of moms knowing this is that when moms value what dads contribute, and even maybe know more about the value of what dads tend to contribute than the dad himself does, that men respond by getting involved with anything that we are told will make us more loved and respected. This is why men were willing to go to war and die. Uncle Sam said, we need you to protect the women, children, the country. And men said, okay, I'll do anything. I'll even die if I'm needed. And so moms need to understand, if they're a single mom and you know who the biological father is, to let the biological dad know, here are the 9 or 10 things that don't come naturally to me. You enforce boundaries really well. When you enforce boundaries really well, and you do it so naturally and easily, and then you go ahead and that will help my son and daughter have postponed gratification. Postponed gratification will help them do better in school or in any sport or activity they're interested in doing. I need you for that. When dads feel needed like that, as opposed to just be told what to do when they're parenting, and therefore they just feel like a babysitter. When they feel that way, they get out. They get it. They get out of the process. They withdraw, or if they get involved, they get involved earning money as opposed to spending time with the children because they feel their money is more valued than their time. When we now know that any father that's involved, when a family is earning between $60,000 and $80,000 a year, depending on where in the U.S. and Canada, and that's $60,000 to $80,000 U.S. dollars, which would be about 27% more for Canadian dollars. When you're earning about that much, your time is from that point on, dad's time is worth more than dad's dime. And so when moms value that, and when we start talking about dads being father warriors, that's when dads will get back in the game to a much greater degree. That said, there are some moms that just do not have any ability to access dads for any number of reasons. And so I very much encourage a number of things. One is Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts. They have a history of being able to train boys with the discipline and also the best aspects of masculinity and to minimize the worst aspects of masculinity. There's something called the Mankind Project, MKP, in the U.S., Canada, Australia, and England, that is very active and very constructive on getting boys to understand the connection to their dads, the connection to their feelings, and to minimize the toxicity of certain aspects of masculinity, and to be able to focus on emotional health intelligence to a much greater degree. There are a number of initiation programs around the country, around the developed nations, which are useful adventure programs, getting boys out in the wilderness with other boys and having them do adventures together and bond and share their feelings and fears is very helpful. If you're oriented toward a faith-based community, whether it's Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, or we get together with a priest, a minister, a rabbi, and an imam, and make sure that the faith-based leader that you select is one that you trust and care about, and that is creative. That particularly that the faith-based leader gets together groups of boys of about your son's age. And so with the boys being encouraged to share their feelings and their fears and their worries with each other, because when boys do that, they don't feel so alone and alienated, and they tend not to withdraw nearly as much. And so when work like that has been done, and even if it's not faith-based, if you have any leader in the community that can get together groups of boys of a similar age, as a fellow named Ashanti Branch has done in Oakland, California, California. He got together boys who were having problems in schools in a poor community, and almost all of which were destined to not graduate from high school. And by getting them to talk with each other and share their feelings and their fears, every single one of them ended up graduating from high school.
That's really amazing to hear stories like that, because we know really, I think what everybody needs is support, but we need it in different ways. And boys often are taught not to talk about their feelings as well, and so then they I think that's where they end up with the suicidal feelings and going through that because they don't know how to express it. Whereas girls, that's what we do. We're very good at ruminating and talking about stuff, but the boys aren't, and a lot of time they're brought up not to. So to have that community, it sounds very important.
Absolutely, and if we really, and also to the other thing that I think that we can do if you're beyond, if you have enough time, energy, and sense of efficacy to work with your school system, to really encourage your school system to hire male teachers. Male teachers are needed enormously because when the children who have the biggest problems, as I said, were dad deprived. So if you go to a family where there's minimal or no father involvement, into a school in which there's no male role models either, and then it doesn't take an author of the boy crisis or anything else to just understand that if a child has had no constructive adult male role model and he's now 9 or 10 years of age, that it's going to be very tempting for him to get involved with some guy that seems like a drug dealer or a gang leader who seems like he knows it all and wants him to join the gang and promises him to have a reputation, an identity if he does join the gang. When testosterone is not channeled well by a father or multiple positive role models, stepfathers can be helpful, grandfathers can be helpful, but no one is going to be as helpful as a biological father, because in the final analysis, the child looks in the mirror and he sees body language and eyes and nose and hair that is similar to his father's, and he worries and wonders who he is. We have my wife adopted a daughter from in a former marriage, and one day a rancher came and visited us from New Zealand, and was telling us a story about these 12 ducklings that were raised by a chicken, and one day the ducklings were big enough to wobble down the hill to a lake that they had at the bottom of the hill, and the ducklings all jumped into the lake and were swimming so happily, and the chickens that took over the raising of the ducklings after the mother and father ducklings were killed, the chicken went berserk, because the chicken can't swim and the ducks can swim, and the chicken assumed the ducks were going to kill themselves. And so my wife's adopted daughter from a former marriage speaks up and said, "Yeah, that's the way I feel, like a duck raised by a chicken." And so it's the power of the biological parent is very important. And you mentioned a little while ago, about it being important to the girls as well. There's about 70 different areas where children suffer when they don't have father involvement, and those children, and in most of those areas, girls also suffer, and particularly they suffer in their relationships to men. They're far more likely, a girl without a father to be involved sexually with a boy at such an early age that they have children out of wedlock and while they are teenagers. And so, because oftentimes girls who don't have father involvement don't know the male non-sexual energy well enough to feel that comfortable. If she's afraid of losing a guy, she just feels like, well, the one thing I know that I can do to keep a guy is to have sex with him. And so she doesn't ask about what she's comfortable doing. She responds just to keep the guy, and that can often result in sex without a father's involvement that leads to pregnancy while she's a teenager.
Yeah, which is, very important. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Dr. Warren Farrell, and we're discussing his book, The Boy Crisis. We'll be back shortly.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
Take us on the go. It's even easier now. The Voice America Talk Radio Network has a mobile app for iOS, Android, or Amazon Kindle. Visit the Apple App Store, Amazon, or Google Play to download the app powered by Aircast. It's free and no registration is necessary. In minutes, you could be enjoying your favorite Voice America Talk Radio host no matter where you are, in the car, out and about, while traveling, or anytime you can't be close to your computer. Catch up on the archives you've missed or discover new shows on the spot. Search Voice America at your favorite app store.
What causes us to be sick? We're not talking about the actual illness or the scientific cause of illnesses. We're talking about your body and health. Listen for the healing whisper of return to peace. Each week, host Dr. Marianne Chase shows you how to listen to your heart to identify poor health, stress, and disease. You'll learn how to heal energetically and spiritually, as well as physically. It's time to depend less on the drugs and more on the heart. The Healing Whisper airs live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Dr. Warren Farrell, and we're discussing his book, The Boy Crisis. So you talked earlier, or you just alluded to boundary enforcement. How important is that?
It turns out to be really important, and so I'll give you an example. How it happens, but most important is the slippery slope that occurs when boys don't have boundary enforcement. So, for example, moms and dads will both set boundaries the same way. Both will say, you can't have ice cream until you finish your peas. Children will test boundaries the same way. Mom, Dad, okay, I had a few more peas. Now can I have my ice cream? But that's where things change, which is the next level, which is the enforcement of boundaries. The child will say, I've had this many more peas, can I have my ice cream now? And mom will then usually feel very proud of herself and say, I'll tell you what, you can't have your ice cream now, but you can have this many more peas. Maybe she takes 10 more peas. And then the kid has 5 more peas and says, okay, I had more peas, can I have my ice cream now? And mom is thinking, I can really make the point here that he should finish the peas, or I can make the point that he can that he didn't have the 10 more peas, he just had 5 more peas. But am I really going to get into a big argument over a few peas? I don't think so. That would be terribly insensitive, especially in a divorce situation where she's already feeling guilty. And so she'll let it go. So whereas Dad was far more likely to say some version of, excuse me, we have a deal here, and the deal here is you finish the peas, you can have your ice cream. And that, the child goes, oh, you are so mean, Mom doesn't do that. And so Dad is more likely to go, you can continue whining and complaining, and then there'll be no more ice cream tomorrow night either. And so what the child with the mother has learned to do is to manipulate a better deal and to focus his attention on how to manipulate that better deal. What the child has learned to do with the dad is to, no matter how much he doesn't like finishing those peas, is that he knows he's not going to get the ice cream until he finishes his peas, so he focuses attention on finishing the peas and therefore does not get attention deficit disorder nearly as often. So children raised predominantly by dads, only 15% have attention deficit to ADHD, whereas children raised predominantly by moms, 30% do. And you can get a sense from the requirement of the dad is to focus the attention, which then the child or children learn to focus the attention on doing what they need to do in order to get what they want to do. And that leads to the single biggest predictor of success. The single biggest predictor of success is postponed gratification, the child learning that it has to finish the peas before it gets what it wants, the ice cream. And so the children with postponed gratification avoid an enormous slippery slope that is true for both sexes, but much more true for boys, which is basically this. The child without postponed gratification goes to school, learns to gets a homework assignment, but during the homework assignment is distracted by a text that comes in, is distracted by an offer to play a new video game, doesn't get the homework done, doesn't get good grades, doesn't get much praise from the teachers, doesn't get much pride from the parents. When it comes to boy-girl time, the girls aren't interested in dating losers, so they're not interested in dating him. And so he starts withdrawing. He maybe withdraws into video game addiction. He may withdraw into drug addiction, hence the enormous opioid crisis that we have in the United States and parts of Canada. Or he withdraws into, at boy-girl time, pornography, because pornography gives him access to a variety of attractive women without fear of rejection. At a price he can afford. And so these types of addictions, and then the more he's addicted in this way, the less good he feels about himself, the more shame he feels, the more likely he is to be depressed, and when he sees that he's not doing as well as his peers, to become potentially suicidal. And in the worst case scenarios, there's such anger that he's not appreciated, and his sensitivity, his intelligence is not appreciated at school, that he takes it out on the school and does the school shooting, because in the United States you have, unlike UK and Canada, you have not only the dad deprivation, but you also have a gun addiction by the culture. And so when you have the dads being out of the picture and guns being in the picture, you have the setup for mass shootings. In Canada, you have a lot of shootings, but they're shootings that are limited to 1 or 2 or 3 people being killed. In the United States, with our greater addiction to guns, you have a greater ability for lots of people to be killed, and therefore for the boy to think, okay, for one day, I get 1 5-minute period, I can get my attention by shooting up a bunch of people at school, and I can therefore have people say, I wish I had paid attention to him rather than neglected him. And or you have the bigger mass shootings that are not school shootings, but almost all of your mass shootings in the United States are done by boys who have minimal father involvement or no father involvement.
Well, this is pretty significant, and it's nice to know that there is something we can do about that void, where we don't have to say, oh, your father's not around, you're doomed, that we just have to understand what our children need so that we can provide that for them.
Yes, and we need to have children. Another huge thing that we can do is we need to start training our children in communication skills in 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade. That is a greater predictor of success and happiness than knowing algebra or trigonometry or any given subject, except reading and writing compete with that. But communication is very important. If we want to have fewer divorces, we need to. I do couples communication courses all around the country because I've seen that the boy crisis often starts with divorces, and divorces start because people can't communicate, parents can't communicate. And so if we really want to get to the underlying root of it, it's getting men and women to know how to communicate, not just with each other, but to children and peers of the same sex and people of different political ideologies as well.
Which is pretty significant, and I agree with you that we should be, schools should step up with this as well, because it is a systemic issue, we do need to learn how to communicate, and there's a lot, I think, missing in our education system that we just need as people. We need to learn how to take care of ourselves, and we need to learn how to communicate, and there's some other gaps there that I think that we haven't looked at it to go, okay, what do we actually need in our society to help everyone
Absolutely.
Succeed? Yeah.
And we need to train, we used to have a sense of purpose for boys being warriors and dying. Well, now we need to redirect that, and we need to talk about boys becoming father warriors. And that means our parents training a boy when there's a new child being born to change diapers, to feed the child, to care for his brother or sister's feelings, to be a babysitter in the neighborhood, to be a babysitter for the children, to learn skill, to be valued and cared for. This also will free women to be what women are often saying. Well, a man can have a wife, a children, and a career. Well, a woman can have a wife, a child, and a career also if she's willing to marry a man who's focused on being the one to raise the children. Then she can go off and have a career that's more success-oriented while the children are being raised successfully by the father. There's no group of children that is raised more successfully than a group of children in an intact family raised predominantly by a dad with a mother who is career-oriented, but mothers do not, as a rule, ever neglect their children. They tend to come home, they'll give up making a trip to the United States from Calgary because the child's recital, the child's birthday, the child has an important day, and they'll fight for that balance between work and being with their children. Men have often not learned to fight for that balance.
Well, and things have changed even in when my mom was growing up in those generations where, the woman looked after the kids in the home and the men went off to work and came home and, they were kind of, the stereotype is tuned out of everything. And that has changed just with women working. But the balance has changed a lot. So what we need to do is find where both parents can work and both parents can come home and spend time with their family and bond in the ways that the children need, as opposed to one parent that's just off doing the heroic thing of making money and doing all of that.
Yeah, absolutely, and we need to educate corporations that the brightest and the best are now men in particular are now beginning to consider it the perk that they most value is the perk of having fewer hours rather than more hours. So, if you talk to most CEOs of major corporations, they often work 80, 90 hours a week, and in a way they're never off from work. They're 24/7 working. But so we need to have our MBA programs train men and women to be co-CEOs, where there's 3 or 4 CEOs working together as a team, so that they can work round the clock. But they only work round the clock as a team, and each of them learns to work more around the 40-hour a week level, and then communicate about what's going on with each other. And so that needs to be the new training for CEOs, so that the job can get done, but it can get done with good coordination among multiple CEOs who work together as a team, like any football or baseball team would work together.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this was an important topic, and I enjoyed it.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you, too. May I share where people can get the Boy Crisis book?
Yeah.
Right now, Amazon is having a sale on the Boy Crisis book, so that's the least expensive place to get it. If you wish to support, if you have a bit more money and you can support a local bookstore, then please, ask the bookstore to order the Boy Crisis before the holidays. And I think it's a really wonderful gift to give a parent or your son or daughter if they're raising a child.
Well, thank you so much. So anybody who has a son or knows a son, I think it's important to read this book just to make sure, whether you're a dad or a mom, that your son is getting what they need. So if you want more information about my story and what I went through, you can read that on my blog site at dr-risk.com. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, your favorite social media website. And don't forget to email questions at anantacalgary@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening today. Be sure to make today a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive. Please join Dr. Rebecca Risk again next Monday at noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel. We'll talk more next week.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network. It's